That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Advancement Amplified, the IA MarCom Shift, a new 5-part pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Dan Giroux, a higher education marketing communications leader focused on elevating the strategic impact of advancement teams. In this follow-up to Advancement Amplified AI for IA, we're zooming out to explore how advancement marketing communications teams can evolve from reactive, service-oriented roles into more strategic drivers of engagement and philanthropic growth. Through candid conversations with senior practitioners, consultants, and thought leaders, we'll unpack topics like organizational structure, smarter success measures, advanced technology integration, and in-house campaign storytelling amid heightened financial scrutiny and growing pressure to deliver meaningful ROI. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the IA MarCom Shift, our 5-part pulse check series on how advancement marketing communication teams move from order takers to strategic drivers of engagement and philanthropic revenue. I'm your host, Dan Giroux. Thanks for listening. In today's episode 3, we're digging into something every university wrestles with: collaboration across a matrix campus. From central marketing communications to schools and units, and of course, within and across advancement itself, especially when you're juggling a scope that might include major gifts, annual giving support, alumni engagement, donor relations, and yes, of course, the heat of a big comprehensive campaign. Why this topic? Because most advancement MarCom teams don't have formal authority, yet their success lives or dies by how well these groups align, from strategic priorities and plans to a single story. I'm thrilled to be joined by Gabrielle Giddings, Associate Vice Chancellor for Campaigns at the University of Denver. Within the advancement division there, Gabrielle leads campaign communications, advancement events, and campaign operations for DU's current Denver Difference campaign. She's spent more than 3 decades in advancement, including leadership roles at Temple Health and the Lewis Katz School of Medicine out here in Philadelphia near me, before shipping out to Denver. In short, she knows how to make collaboration stick and demonstrate results to leaders. Gabrielle, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for that intro, and thanks for having me on today.
I want to get your take on this question, which is something that I think many of us in advancement marketing communication roles and experiences have had to contend with, which is, where does cross-campus collaboration tend to break down the quickest? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, all of us who are in higher education, we've certainly seen it, we've experienced it, we've lived it. A couple of things that I've definitely observed. We all work in really complex organizations, whether it's a big university, a smaller college. There are always going to be a lot of different competing priorities, a lot of different competing directives. You mentioned this in your intro, is particularly within advancement. Many of us are working in centralized and decentralized models. So unit development and engagement officers have their own relationships with faculty, their own relationships with their unit MarCom teams. And then you have this big monolith of a central university advancement team or university relations team. But when you don't have those good relationships, that's when communication starts to break down the fastest, not really understanding who the players are, what the priorities are, and not being able to really be understanding of the different relationships that our colleagues are having to manage. That's another big driver of a breakdown in information and a breakdown of relationships. And then I would just say across campus, and again, we've all experienced this, information moves really fast, but it also moves really quickly in silos. So the stronger relationships you have across campus, the easier it is to engage across those silos. All the process in the world is not going to be a replacement for that.
Well, I think that matches patterns that I've experienced and seen across the sector. And today's episode is, of course, meant to focus on how do we prevent those and how do we enhance those relationships. Doing the work is one thing, but tending to the relationships that undergird that work is equally important. So let's start by mapping that. What does the matrixed environment look like at Denver's campus, or if you want to think back to your experience at Temple? What are those ley lines and pressure points?
that really complex relationship, especially in advancement. You have your frontline teams, your development officers, your engagement officers, who are really focused on external relations, building relationships that ultimately drive engagement and giving. Your university MarCom team, which is really concerned with reputation, branding. Your admission MarCom team, which is really concerned with admission and enrollment marketing. And then, you have your faculty who are really thinking about their classroom experience, but also their research, how their research is positioned. All these different things play into what becomes a really, really complex system that creates a lot of pain points because people have so many different competing priorities. So I think that one of the things that we really focus on at DU, and I've focused on across my career, is seeing all of those goals as complementary goals, not as competing goals. And I think that's where I see a lot of relationships thrive and a lot of relationships fail. And if we're being honest, I think many of us have come into or worked in shops where those silos really did create competition. They created a sense of difference. But being able to really understand what those complementary goals are and how we can align them with each other without sacrificing what we're each trying to achieve is a really good way to break down some of those barriers. But it's hard work to do because we are all driven by what we've been asked to do in advancement. At DU, we're in the middle of $1 billion campaign. That is my first priority, is communications that drive $1 billion. My admissions colleagues are about enrollment. Their charge is to have a full enrollment pipeline. And sometimes those goals clash. So how we can sit down at the table together, how we can talk through those things, and how we can craft programs, projects, and messaging where we're achieving similar goals through the same channels, the same activities, but using them differently is a way to really, I think, address that pain point. I think the other thing too that's really challenging, this is a struggle that we have in advancement often, that maybe some of our other partners aren't quite as aware of because of the work that we do with relationship management. There's a difference between good comms practice and what good relationship management sometimes drives. And that's something that we're really hyper focused on and sensitive to. I might not think a gift story is the right thing to do for the university, for our campaign, but it might be the right thing for a donor. And we might have to fit that into our comms cycle because that's what's important for the relationship. And we deal a lot with those zigs and zags in advancement. Being able to articulate why that's important to our colleagues who don't work in that space is also a really important thing to share and a thing to get people bought into.
Yeah, well, you've sort of exposed a dirty little secret about my past, which is I spent 12 years in the marketing branding agency world before going in-house to a role at Drexel leading advancement MarCom. And that focus on relationship building and nurturing and delivery aided me tremendously in building the relationship and building those relationships quickly when you step into a new organization. And when I joined Drexel in March of 2017, that first order of magnitude business was to help architect a comprehensive campaign platform and communication strategy. And, if I didn't have that experience in my back pocket, I don't know that I would have been successful. It would have taken 2, maybe even, 3 times as long to do that work. So I hear you on the importance of relationship management. And but before we go further, I'm curious to dig just a little bit more into some of the pain. If we use that 80-20 Pareto principle, where would you see the friction between these colleagues, right? But with competing priorities and leaders who are looking for different things? Is it timelines, approvals, unclear ownership and decision making, lack of direction? Like where do you tend to see most of that angst created?
Yeah. Can I answer yes to all?
All of the above.
All of the above. As communicators, we experience this all the time, that there's a belief that creative work is just, I think we've talked about this before, Dan, you wave your magic communication jazz hands and a beautiful thing appears in front of you. And so I think for my team and teams I've worked on in the past, one of the biggest pain points is the amount of time it takes to do the work. and the need for speed in the advancement field. We have a donor who's ready for a proposal. We have to turn it around, regardless of when we're ready for it, and whether we saw it coming. That creates some pain points, I think, inside of advancement, but also with some of our partners who don't understand that need to be really reactive sometimes, and to drop everything and move for something that's going to close a transformational gift for the university that's good for everybody. But it means asking people to trust. It means asking people to leap. It means asking people maybe to jump out of their usual process. And, you spent so much time building really great processes so the work happens the way it's supposed to happen. And then you show up and you say, hey, I need you to scrap all of that and we need to do this tomorrow. And that's a friction point. And that's where, again, coming back to relationship building and trust is so important. You can't ask people to do that unless you've built that trust with people and they understand the value of the request and why you're making it.
Now that we've laid out the collaboration matrix and some of the pain and friction points, let's dive into some of the systems that you utilize at University of Denver to try and proactively mitigate maybe some of that tension, whether it's clear processes, scopes of responsibility. How do you and your team stay ahead of that idea that, hey, we can plan for a certain amount and dedicate resources and build timelines accordingly, but at the same time, we also have to plan for the unplanned, that something is going to come in and probably disrupt those best laid plans?
When I got to DU and when I got to Temple and many other places that I've worked, that idea of planning was pretty foreign, right? It was, we just take the things as they come, we turn them around and we hope for the best. And so I think planning, for starters, in the discipline of planning is something that my team has really worked to introduce on the comm side, on the events side. How do we know? And it's for exactly that reason that you said, when we know what's coming, then we can plan for the unplanned. We can plan for the unexpected. But if everything is unexpected or everything is on the fly, you can't make space for those things. So planning ahead has really helped us think about how we're going to be proactive instead of reactive. And it also allows us to see the difference between what is an urgent request, what's a reactive request, and what's a bad planning request. And I know, as people who work in advancement shops, we see those all the time. Maybe not all the time. We see those sometimes too. But that's been a real, we talked about pain points. That's a hard thing for people to get into the discipline of doing, is to think ahead. What does my pipeline flow look like? What does my event schedule look like? What comms pieces do I want to produce this year? What impact reporting do I need to do? What does that look like in terms of our communication plan? And then, factoring into it, I think one of the things that we found jumping into a comprehensive campaign, the Denver Difference, is that it's not enough just to do our sort of day-to-day communications. We have to really lean heavily now into content marketing and content marketing planning and doing production of things that fall maybe outside of the sort of what people see as the traditional and typical comms work of a comms shop and an advancement shop. We're developing story packages. We're building out journeys. All of those things are things that we have to put attention and time to really get to be a best-in-class communication shop. But that also, we have to have the time to do that.
What are some of the systems and tools that you use to do that advanced planning work?
Yeah, so some brass tacks things we use. We use Asana for project management. Been working to really develop a much better discipline for using Asana. Our Central University Relations team uses Reich, and that's actually a really nice thing that we have is we have access into their editorial calendar in their Reich, and we are building access for our editorial into our Asana practice so that we always have a pulse on what each team is doing and what's going to be pushed out in our university newsroom, how we can support it. If we have advancement materials that we want to make sure are integrated into their storytelling. So that's been a really nice discipline for us. We use an internal tool called Team Up, which just has every single event and comms, communication, marketing, development piece that we have in process visible to our entire advancement team. So anybody can look and see when your email's going out, where are proposals in process, when is an event date. That works for us on the comms team. I'm not sure that it is as widely used as we would like.
That was going to be my follow-up question,
Yeah.
is how many of your colleagues actually refer to that?
It's like right there on all of our tools. It's right on our wiki. You can access it and see it, but I would say very few. So that's a lesson for us. I mean, I think that's an important thing as communicators is we have to think about if our messages aren't hitting, if our tools aren't hitting, what are we doing that's not working, and how do we adapt to meet our partners? So that's something we're taking a long look at right now, is how do we do a better job communicating out what's in process, what we've closed, what tools are available and new. And so stay tuned on that. But that is something we're digging into quite a bit, because we see that as our responsibility. If people aren't using it, it's something that we need to address.
Our team spent a lot of time looking at the intake process. We had a project management platform that worked great for us and okay for our close advancement partners, and for some not okay. But we didn't open it up to other schools' units. I think there were select partners in admissions and central marketing communications who would do recurring requests for things like data to be able to email alumni with quote unquote our blessing. So how do you intake? Intake? Is there a centralized process?
Yeah.
Have you found simple is better than complicated?
Yeah. It's interesting you asked that, because we're actually deep in a whole business process review right now on how we do intakes and kickoffs and every single piece of our event cycle. And we really see events as communications. They're just another extension of communications. But I think, you said a couple of things that are so true. It's, our partners run the gamut from I know what I want to I have no idea what I want and I want help. And so what we find is a one size fits all sort of intake form or process doesn't really meet that. And I think the other thing that we found is that when we put a form between us and people, they think that we don't want to have a conversation, which could not be farther from the truth. So I think for the team, that's something we've been really working hard on, because on the one hand, we need all the information. We can't, we need to know what your budget is. We need to know what your deliverable is. We need to know if you're thinking if something is going to be print or if it's going to be digital when it's produced. We need that information. But trying to keep that sort of intake form process as simple as possible and not have it be a replacement for a strategy conversation is, increasingly more and more important. But then again, that creates some tension and conflict too, because people don't have time. They don't have time for conversations. So, there's also I told you what I wanted. Can you just make it for me? So I think I would be, I'd be untruthful if what I was saying didn't ring true for many other communicators out there. But I think, for our team at the end of the day, we're really in it to get to the best place, to be good strategic partners, and to be flexible and good listeners with our partners when we're working with them. So there is an amount of flexibility that we have to incorporate into our intake processes, that we have to incorporate into the tools that we use. There are people who will never fill out a form, and I know that, and that has to be okay sometimes.
Yes, I could name a few names too on that front.
Yeah.
A lot of it starts there, right? It's and actually before getting to the form, because if you've done your sort of partnership work well, that your partners have been educated on what they need to get, what's the right point at which to submit that. Is it okay to wait until I've got everything answered, or can I submit 80%, knowing that we're going to have a kickoff meeting and we're going to cover all the rest of the ground that we need to cover? So remaining flexible in your partnerships is so important. But at the same time, there are some lines I think you need to draw in the sand to say we can't get going until we've got these minimum type of criteria met. So I mentioned in my introduction the concept of authority, and that advancement marketing communication teams tend not to have a lot, because they're traditionally, I believe, seen as more service oriented and fulfilling requests. And part of what we're trying to shift here with this series, how to do that. How do you say no? In that situation when hey, if we get going on this, it's going to result in a lot more iterative work and potentially wasted resources, when we're trying to also tackle these principal level proposals or other high impact work, yet a partner over here is asking and maybe even pressuring you to get started and not understanding why.
We say yes and a lot, or yes but a lot, or yes but not right now a lot, but we rarely say no. And that's because we need to trust that when people are coming to us with a request, they're coming from a place where they believe they need it. So that's where I think the strategy conversations are really, really important. There's a couple other things that go into it. So when we say yes, but not right now, it's really helpful to be able to say, these are the 6 other things that we have in the pipeline right this minute. And this comes back to planning. We didn't know this request was coming, and we're going to have to move something out of our pipeline to accommodate this. Is this an urgent priority because you just started thinking about it? I would probably ask this more nicely. Is this an urgent priority because it really is urgent because there's a donor at the other end waiting for something? Or is this something you're just thinking about right now that feels urgent because you're thinking about it? If it's the first, let's figure out what we can move. And I'm going to need to talk to some other colleagues and leaders about what we kick to the back to make room for this. But if it's not, we're going to need to put this on the back burner, and we're going to have to prioritize it in the full suite of communications deliverables that we have going on. I'm fortunate that I have colleagues who really understand the value of prioritization. So I meet really regularly with the head of our development team, our unit development and engagement teams, to talk about priorities, to say, we have these 30 things that are on the plate right now. What are the most important things? Because we have to move something. And for the people we have to move their projects out of the way, how are we going to message that to them to make sure that they don't feel like they're always getting the short end of the stick because their projects always drop to the bottom? And having that relationship, and those can be really hard conversations because sometimes the answer is we need everything right now, but it's not doable, and we can't. As leaders and managers, we also have to be really thoughtful about the resources and the time of the people on our teams. So I think having those partnerships, having people really understand what goes into doing the work, being partners in doing the work, bringing them in when things lag and when they stall out, to understand what that drag looks like and how that downstream effect affects other things that you have in process, really helps us be able to say yes, no, or not right now. But we need to back burner that for later. So, did that answer your?
Yeah. A follow-up question to you. At Denver in the advancement division, does your role sit on the sort of the leadership circle of the vice president or senior vice president of the division?
Yeah, so we have a senior management team, which is the heads of each of our functional areas. So yes, and that's been, I think, an important piece of being able to do this work.
I found our team began to have a lot more success when we constructed a tighter and ongoing dialogue with leadership, where we had to, from time to time, say, here's what's on our plate. These new requests are coming in, or it could even be your own senior vice president who's adding requests to that pile, right? And then you got to juggle, well, okay, how do we handle that? But we found creating a more transparent and leadership involved process helped to create sort of the authority that our team members lacked or felt that they lacked in conversing with different frontline fundraisers. At Drexel, there were 15 schools and colleges, and you had all manner of different types of units that you're supporting. And of course, what's happening in the business school isn't at the top of mind of what's happening with the engineering school and the advancement officers supporting their work. So we did have to do a lot of sorting out through order priorities. What can wait? Could we actually push back and say, why don't you guys do a first draft of a proposal, and we'll play editor on that. So there was sort of a constant, going back to your point about the limited resources, what is the best use of the limited resources that we have for the priorities that are on our plate. So involving leadership and having a direct line to the head of your division on that and other senior frontline staff is really important, because then they feel like, okay, we understand why these decisions are being made, and also, if needed, it then can unlock additional resources. If you need to bring in freelance development writers, for example, when capacity sort of spikes, it can give you more open to have that kind of dialogue and say, listen, we can do it. We can manage an outside writer. Here's what that cost is. Do you want to go that route? Yes or no?
Yeah, and we do a lot of that. And I'll say too, I'm fortunate to have really, really good, really thoughtful colleagues who are collaborative and who think through and are able to articulate where they're coming from. Coming back to that complementary and competing goals question, within advancement, I and my team might not see something as being strategic or important, but I'm not sitting in a unit with a dean and my executive director of development's ear saying you have to get this done. And that's a priority in and of itself. So being able to have those relationships and being able to really kind of dig into those pieces and to have it be a partnership, not a comms ATM, I give you a thing and you give it back to me, has really helped us be able to kind of get into that prioritization flow a little bit better.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor. Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 33 to 35% email open rates. The impact, personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents.
In our pre-conversation, you had identified a couple of really interesting projects and areas where there is a lot of marketing communication folks that come together, from, of course, building the Denver brand and the Denver Difference campaign to transformational giving and a few others. Would love to give you the floor and just kind of share a couple of those case studies. We've spent a little bit of time maybe diving into the weeds of how to do the work, and but let's pull back to a 10,000 foot view and spotlight some of those successes that you've found collaborating with university relations or school and unit communication teams and so forth.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. One of the things I'd love to talk about is how we got to our Denver Difference campaign identity and our campaign visual identity and our messaging platform. We engaged with an outside partner, a comms partner, Paris Leaf, who came in and did a lot of work with us. But what was really, and they were great, but what was really great internally was the partnership that we had with university relations and then with our unit MarCom officers and teams all the way through launch. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Even when we selected our communications partner, we did that with university relations. A lot of time advancement will go off and do their thing. We invited them into that process. It was really important that they felt comfort with the partner that we chose. So they were part of the really small vetting committee that we had, the interview committee that we had. We had when we had folks come in and do presentations, it was folks from advancement and folks from our university MarCom team, the marketing side and the communications and visual and creative side came in and reacted to the work. So everybody had a stake and had a voice in who we chose to work with. And I think that really set us off on the right partnership foot. University of Denver had just gone through a big brand refresh, so we knew it was really important to us that whatever we did for the campaign felt true to the brand and felt like, as Paris Leaf would say, was a sibling relationship to the brand, that it felt cohesive, that it would appeal to our donor and alumni audiences, but still like very much in sync with our core brand messaging. And I think that also helped illustrate what it means to have complementary goals. We were really clear about our audience. Our campaign identity is for a very concrete, specific audience. It's the people who are invested in our fundraising success and have the power to make it happen, who want to engage with the University of Denver, who have an affiliation with us through their alumni relationships. So that was our audience, very different from a university brand, which has to speak to a much larger swath of people. So being able to really work through some of that with our university relations partners and help them understand where we were coming from, put us on a great path to develop a really strong visual identity and a messaging platform that ultimately aligns and works really well with the brand. Our campaign theme, the Denver Difference, has actually been adopted as the university's next in-market campaign for admission and enrollment. We're using it in a lot of different ways. So it just speaks to the strength of the work that we did together, that we came to something that felt so universally adaptable. So that's one thing I want to say. And then when we were coming into to doing our campaign launch, one of the things that was really important to us was to make sure that schools and units felt like this was their campaign as much as, and their campaign launch as much as anybody else's. We did a big public launch, thousands of people at our daytime community event. We really wanted to drive traffic there. And we knew we weren't going to get people there if they couldn't see themselves reflected in the campaign, in this Denver Difference campaign. So we really worked closely with our frontline fundraisers, our engagement officers, and then also with our unit MarCom teams to identify points of pride that connected to our campaign priorities that we could showcase in our public launch. So if you came to our public launch event, we had all these stations set up. Every single school and unit was represented. But more than that, we spent a lot of time before launch going and meeting one-on-one with our unit MarCom teams to walk them through the campaign brand, the campaign identity, our messaging platform, some pieces that we had built out specifically for every school and unit. Every school and unit had its own campaign fundraising priority brochure that we were developing with the deans and with our fundraisers and with our unit MarCom teams, so they could see themselves reflected in it. They knew what the value was in engaging with the campaign for their particular school or unit. And then they knew what they were driving people to. So we did all, like, what do you do? We did toolkits for folks for the campaign launch. This is how you can talk about it. But we did really customized toolkits as well. So, for the law school, come and hear about our law clinics and, knowing your rights if you get towed, like those kinds of very tangible things. Come see how our Corbell School and our Pardee Center is modeling climate change, the impacts of climate change in the world, those kinds of things. So it's very specific, very tangible for the things that our school and unit audiences would be interested in. And that worked, and it built a really great foundation for the continuing work that we're doing, both with our unit MarCom teams and with our central MarCom team on continued storytelling for the campaign.
School unit activation is so important.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're left with really a campaign that was constructed by Advancement, or maybe Advancement and the Central MarCom division together. But
I'll say too, I feel like I have an advantage in that space. My work at Temple was in a unit. And so really understanding the unit and central tension from the unit perspective, I think has helped me really understand what I needed to bring and what my team needed to bring to our unit partners as we launched this campaign.
Yeah. And, depending on how large an institution is, mm-hmm. recognizing that not all of them may require the same level of support. There might be some schools and colleges mm-hmm. that have more internal resources and team members who might be able to do more of the lift. And then there are others who don't and might need more of mm-hmm. a advancement communications or advanced marketing communications team. So having sort of maybe a tiered strategy for how you provide support. You mentioned toolkits and templates. That's certainly helpful, but there might be some that just they need somebody to help them take things a step further. Mm-hmm. And and it's mutually beneficial. You as Advancement are getting broader activation and expanding the reach of the campaign narrative. And, and they're participating and hopefully benefiting from donor engagement and constituent engagement. So appreciate that overview of the Denver Difference. Are there any other examples that you want to spotlight?
I could go all day, Dan. A couple other I want to just point to. One is an ongoing relationship that we've built around issues management and crisis communication with our central university relations team. And that is something that I feel is special at the University of Denver. I don't know that I've ever had quite this level of relationship around issues management before with the university relations team. And I understand why. I mean, it's, so many of these issues that we manage as a university are fraught, they're confidential, they're going to be challenging. And a lot of work has to go into getting the messaging right. And again, that's a place where really understanding where your partners are coming from has made a huge difference. So one of the things that we've really built is a great sort of information flow between my team, me, and our issues management team to be able to just give heads up when things are coming. And it works both ways because our frontline fundraising and unit engagement officers are out in the units. They're hearing things a lot of times before anybody else is hearing things. So our responsibility to bring what we're hearing sort of back, what we're hearing from our alumni and constituents when they're, writing and calling into advancement with things that they're hearing in the world, for us to really be good partners in bringing that information to our university relations partners and flagging it for them. And on the flip side, I think it's been a real education for all of us. I think our university relations team, when we started to dig in with each other, we really understood that our frontline teams are the people who are out there answering questions. They're taking the hit, right? We get to sit in our offices as comms teams and we're a little bit removed, but it's our engagement officers, it's our fundraisers who are really bearing the brunt of the questions from people who have invested in the university and want to make sure that their investment is being stewarded well. So being able to represent that point of view to our unit MarCom team helped open their eyes to why it was so important to us and why we would get frustrated when something would hit and we would have no idea it was coming. So over the past 3 years, we've built this really great flow of, and a lot of it is just talking to each other. I can't say there's any sort of magic process or system that we have, but we've really built the trust with their donors and with our alumni.
Having experienced crisis and issues professionals who are able to take the lead with university leadership to then draft essentially those top level sanction messaging points, but then also giving the a little bit of flexibility and trust to advancement or schools and other units to do the necessary translation to their respective audiences, and then be available, be of counsel if we're unsure how to message something. Going back to them and getting their input as partners is really helpful. And you're right, advancement communication teams hear from their frontline staff a lot, but both on the alumni and donor side of somebody's unhappy or somebody's looking for more information or, how are we able to say anything on this yet? What do we have to say? So it's a really critical role that advancement marketing teams play, in those types of instances. And as we've all seen over the last couple of years, the frequency of issues has increased, and it's having it's not going to be perfect because each issue is going to be different, but having a process that you can rely on and start to educate partners of what to expect, within a certain time frame, we're able to help turn around messaging points that have been approved by leaders, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't say it was the most fun part of my scope of responsibility, but such a critical one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that I'm an advancement marketing communications professional and not a university relations marketing and communications professional. I like to get some sleep sometimes and occasionally have an uninterrupted weekend.
We've hit a number of really important areas connected with collaboration. And I want to now transition to, you've found those types of opportunities such as building the brand where you can partner and demonstrate success. What do you do with that success? How do you share that upward and outward, whether that's with, in your case, university relations leadership, of course, advancement leadership, president or chancellor, and other key leaders, where you can say, hey, we came together on this and here's what the outcomes were. We succeeded, and just start to sort of celebrate and champion that collaboration. And I ask because when I've seen collaboration be successful, the people involved in that work only want to do more of that. It self-reinforces. So you want to, again, take the time to celebrate, but also demonstrate to leaders that by working a certain way, we are capable of more impactful strategic output and not just being that, as you called it, I think a proposal or content ATM or service desk, which unfortunately I do think a lot of teams and professionals are kind of caught in because of the volume and the pace. They can't quite create the space to break out and do some of the things that we've been talking about here today.
Yeah. So we there's a couple of ways, and there's no magic solution to measuring ROI and what your KPIs are, and it's hard. It's really hard in the communication space. I think that's something that we all really wrestle with. So there are a few things. One is we try really hard to sort of keep track of outcomes from events, from proposals that we write. Sort of those like day-to-day things. Did something get funded? How did it get funded? What was the outcome of that? Did an event move a gift conversation? How can we establish, this is actually important. One of the things we've really worked hard to do is to work with partners to establish what our objectives and results, measurable results are going into a project, so we can look at them afterwards. And that's also helped with the discipline of what communications we do and what events we do and what we don't do. What are you trying to accomplish, and how are you going to measure whether or not it was successful? That is a really great question to ask folks and to work through with people, because it gets us all on the same page. So we've done a lot more of that, and that's also been really helpful in allowing us to track some of the outcomes. But I think too, some of the things that are real wins are the things that are quiet, right? The things that you don't always see unless you elevate them. We've done a really great partnership building with our alumni magazine in our central division. And that's a place where we have worked top to bottom to revamp our strategy and our approach to how we do the magazine. So from having input into editorial calendars, to having input into article review to make sure that like our donor relations team is seeing articles that have something to do with a gift before they hit the magazine, or anything that has a donor, element or aspect to it, to redoing the mailing list together to make sure that we're getting the magazine into the right hands of the right people, to launching an opt-in strategy. All of those things are things that you don't see. They're just process work where you just do them together. We're always at it. But in our last alumni survey, our alumni, name the magazine as probably the most important communication that they get, sort of right up there with the monthly DU newsletter that we send to them. After we went through the mailing list review, the number of complaints, there's always complaints with the magazine. People are like, why am I getting the magazine? Why am I in your list? Take me off your list. Stop sending me the magazine. They got virtually none of those from the last issue of the magazine after we had gone through that process. And that's a win, because that's a great stewardship of university resources. And it means we're putting this really great publication, this great storytelling into the hands of people who really want to see it and want to be engaged. And then the last piece, which was just so exciting to share, was we're building a new building on campus, which is partially donor funded. And we had a little bit of a back and forth about how we were going to position this building in the magazine. Was it just going to be a nuts and bolts, like, hey, campus, there's going to be a big dirt pile and a dirt hole in the ground for the next 6 months and you can't park in your parking spaces? Or we're going to talk about it in this aspirational way, what it was going to do for the university to build our reputation for future students, for our research enterprise. And we were able to land on a really happy middle ground. And one of our readers read the article and picked up the phone and called a frontline team member and said, I'd like to fund that building. I'd like to make a gift. And it was our first big gift to the building. And it was really exciting. That's part of how we measure the work is, you never know that story is going to generate a gift, but you have to do the work to make the luck happen. So that's it.
Yeah. That's a few great examples to end on for teams and professionals out there who are looking around going, I don't have a big campaign to work with, that could be a jump start to maybe collaborating or being seen as a strategic partner differently. So there are opportunities everywhere, from the work that you're already doing on a small scale to larger, revamps of programs and fundraising efforts. So it's out there. You have to pick and choose, the right ones strategically, and what's worth trying to demonstrate, your ability to move the needle on and work differently on it. I'd like to, Gabrielle, kick it back to you for one final question, which is if you're out there in the audience listening to this and wondering, a lot of this sounds great, but if next week, if I could put one thing into practice that would try to, jumpstart this type of collaboration that we've been talking about, what would your advice be? Where would you suggest that they start?
Well, I would suggest, and this is a really basic one, but if you are not meeting regularly with your marketing communications partners across campus in a one-on-one way, I would start there. I would start by representing the thing that you would like to see reflected back at you. These are the things that we have in process. How can we be a partner to you? I know that our team probably comes to you with requests that have to do with advancement that may feel so far out of left field for you. How can we be good partners in supporting you? What can we take off your plate if that's doable? Or what can we give you to make that reasonable? So that's one thing I would say has been for us where we started. That's where we started. How do we build those really good relationships with those teams? The other thing I would say, and this is more a logistical, like technical piece. We've put a lot of work into building out templates for folks over the past 2 years, proposal templates, one-sheeter templates, like all of those kinds of templates. And that has been a good discipline for us as well, invitation templates, because it slows down on the wait. And it gives people some tools to be able to do things in brand in a way that like meets quality standards, but not have to wait for us. Because like you said, we're all backed up. We're all busy. Projects take a long time. So being able to really provide support and those templated materials and enable people to do things for themselves has been, I think, another really great starting place for us.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a really insightful and actionable, I think, for our audience episode. We'll include links to resources and maybe even some of those templates that you've mentioned if they're available to share more publicly. So we'll connect on that and see what we can build into the links for the show. From mapping the matrix and who the key players are, to pressure points, to systems and tools and ways and partnership habits that could be used to improve collaboration. I think this is a gold mine of information for advancement marketing communication teams. And when I say advancement MarCom, I think we all know that there's a bit of a spectrum there from truly advancement MarCom to advancement communications to development communications to development marketing and communications. There are many different labels that we wear out there, but I think there's something in this episode for everybody. I want to thank you again, Gabrielle, for joining us, and for our listeners out there taking the time to join us today. New episodes drop Thursday, so just want to make sure that's on everybody's radar. Episode 4 of the IA MarCom Shift will be out on August 28th. In that episode, we're going to dive into what advancement MarCom teams can and should be able to do far more than they're currently doing. How can they expand their impact and the strategic nature of the work that we're doing? Large or small, campaign mode or evergreen mode, there's opportunity abound. I'm Dan Giroux. Thanks for spending time with us. If this episode was useful, please share it with a colleague and leave a quick rating. See you next week.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.